Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the forum, the Institute of Politics, and our program honoring the life of President John F. Kennedy. Take just a moment to recognize the Dean of the Kennedy School, Al Carnesale. Delighted to have you with us. We have other people we'd like to introduce, and Senator Kennedy will do that in just a moment. I want to give you just a little bit of background on this event. Each year for the past 5 years, we have chosen a part of President Kennedy's public life to mark his birthday and to recommit ourselves to the purposes of the Kennedy School of Government and the Institute of Politics, and that is to provide individuals from diverse backgrounds with the skills and tools necessary to be successful public leaders and to inspire young people to enter public life. In past years, we have convened distinguished panels to recall the President's considerable wit and humor on one occasion, his commitment to the arts. No, wait, his wit and humor was on more than one occasion, wasn't it? On one occasion, we convened people to talk about the President's wit and sense of humor. On another, his commitment to the arts in America. And on another, his ability to inspire people to public service. Today, which is the 76th anniversary of the President's birth, we return to the notion of service, in large part because of the election of a new president who, like President Kennedy, has promised to institutionalize and enlarge the opportunities for Americans to serve their country. It's also appropriate to revisit the notion of service because of the great interest of our students here at the Kennedy School in helping national service along. There is, in fact, a Kennedy School project on national service, which, along with the Institute's Student Advisory Committee, is co-sponsoring this forum event. The project on national service has enlarged and enhanced this birthday celebration by bringing in 24 young people from various full-time service programs around the country to meet with Office of National Service Director Eli Siegel and to participate in focus group discussions on national service policy. Those of us at the Institute and the school are grateful for their hard work on this issue and their participation in this annual event. So I'd like to recognize Kennedy School Professor Gary Oren on sabbatical, working with Boston's famous City Year program, who is here with some City Year participants. And Gary, would you and your City Year colleagues stand to be recognized? And could I ask the Kennedy School National Service Project participants and their guests from around the country to stand so that we may recognize you. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Senator Kennedy, who, like John Kennedy Jr., serves on the Institute of Politics Senior Advisory Committee and is such a good friend and supporter of the Institute and our work. Like the Commonwealth Senator Kennedy serves, we can say at the Institute that he's always there and producing when we need him. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Edward M. Kennedy, the Senior Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you very much. I think all of us want to thank Charlie Royer for the wonderful job that he does as the director of the Institute of Politics. This bears my brother's name, and all of us are impressed by his leadership and the programs that have been developed and continue to be developed to hopefully attract many of the young people here at the university to public service. As Charlie Royer pointed out, this week would have been President Kennedy's birthday, and the members of the family in 1990 developed a Profile and Courage Award to be awarded to an elected political official who, as a matter of principle, puts the public interest ahead of political considerations. That winner of 1993 was a person who was a governor of a state and in many respects could have been awarded the Profiling Courage for 3 reasons. One, because he was willing to face difficult economic challenges in his state and put forward a program that was adopted in his state. Secondly, because of the vigorous educational reform program that he developed over a great deal of opposition and implemented. And third, because of his belief that security is a basic and fundamental right, and that we ought to free, in this case, his state and the country from assault weapons. Will you give Governor Florio of New Jersey a nice round of applause as the winner of the 1993 Profiling Courage Award? Good. Finally, volunteerism has come a long way. And I was here in the early 1950s at the Phillips Brooks House as a volunteer at the South End Settlement House in Boston. And I think one of the clearest calls, as I think everyone here understands President Kennedy's comment about asking what you can do for your country, not your country for you. And the first act as president was the executive order on the Peace Corps. We'll hear more about that later from the participants. I had the chance to attend the 25th anniversary of Peace Corps volunteers and have lunch with those volunteers and asked each of the ones that were at my table why they volunteered. And they responded virtually identically that this was the first time that anyone had asked them to do anything for anyone else. President Kennedy, President Clinton believe the reservoir of interest and commitment and involvement that is across the spectrum of our society, young students, school dropouts, students in schools, doctors, math, science teachers, the whole range of different interests and skills, senior grandparents, that the spirit of volunteerism is as basic as any value in our society. And President Clinton has an exciting program that we are moving through the Senate of the United States and expect to mark that up in the next 3 weeks under Eli Siegel. And so all of us are welcome. This panel, which is so timely, as well as the recommendations that were given last evening from those who are out in the front line of voluntary service in communities across the country, plus a City Year, which continues to inspire not only young people here in Massachusetts, but throughout the country and really throughout the world. I think we're in for a great session this afternoon, and we welcome all of you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here again and to participate in this forum at the School of Government. I think it's most appropriate that the topic this year's forum is national service. Once again, the idea of national service is being embraced by Americans, and just 2 weeks ago, as my uncle said, President Clinton introduced his national service legislation to Congress. No issue, I think, was closer to President Kennedy's heart than national service. It was the defining ideal of his entire career in public life, and I think it may well be the idea for which he is best remembered as president. He sounded the call to service on his first day as president in the well-known words of his inaugural address, which you will see on a film that has been prepared especially for this forum. And still today, I think the Peace Corps is one of his most enduring legacies. My father took the concept of national service seriously, but he never took himself too seriously. Once, when he addressed a group of summer interns in the White House, he said, "Sometimes I wish I just had a summer job here too." And I'm sure President Clinton occasionally feels that way. But I am sure of another thing as well, and that's that I know my father would be proud of the way that President Clinton has rekindled an enthusiasm for national service in this country. We have an excellent and a highly experienced panel here this afternoon, and they'll develop many of the aspects of the issue. But before I introduce them, we're going to begin this program by showing a short film. The film begins with President Kennedy announcing the formation of the Peace Corps, and then you'll hear an excerpt of a speech he gave at Vanderbilt University, in which he talks about the responsibilities of citizens to serve. And I'm especially grateful to Alan Goodrich of the John F. Kennedy Library for putting this film together, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you.
I have today signed an executive order providing for the establishment of a Peace Corps on a temporary pilot basis. I'm also sending to Congress a message opposing authorization of a permanent Peace Corps. This corps will be a pool of trained men and women sent overseas by the United States government or through private institutions and organizations to help foreign countries meet their urgent needs for skilled manpower. It is our hope to have between 500 to 1,000 people in the field by the end of this year. We will send Americans abroad who are qualified to do a job. We will send those abroad who are committed to the concept which motivates the Peace Corps. It will not be easy. None of the men and women will be paid a salary. They will live at the same level as the citizens of the country which they're sent to, doing the same work, eating the same food, speaking the same language. We're going to put particular emphasis on those men and women who have skills in teaching, agriculture, and in health. I'm hopeful that it will be a source of satisfaction to Americans and a contribution to world peace. Thank you. Mr. Jackson.
Mr. President, you said in your State of the Union message.
But this nation was not founded solely on the principle of citizen rights. Equally important, though too often not discussed, is the citizen's responsibility. For our privileges can be no greater than our obligations. The protection of our rights can endure no longer than the performance of our responsibilities. Each can be neglected only at the peril of the other. I speak to you today, therefore, not of your rights as Americans, but of your responsibilities. They are many in number and different in nature. They do not rest with equal weight upon the shoulders of all. Equality of opportunity does not mean equality of responsibility. All Americans must be responsible citizens, but some must be more responsible than others by virtue of their public or their private position, their role in the family or community, their prospects for the future, or their legacy from the past. Increased responsibility goes with increased ability. For of those to whom much is given, much is required. You have responsibilities, in short, to use your talents for the benefit of the society which helped develop those talents. You must decide, as Goethe put it, whether you will be an anvil or a hammer, whether you will give to the world in which you were reared and educated the broadest possible benefits of that education. Of the many special obligations incumbent upon an educated citizen, I would cite three as outstanding. Your obligation to the pursuit of learning, your obligation to serve the public, your obligation to uphold the law. If the pursuit of learning is not defended by the educated citizen, it will not be defended at all. For there will always be those who scoff at intellectuals, who cry out against research, who seek to limit our educational system. Modern cynics and skeptics see no more reason for landing a man on the moon, which we shall do, than the cynics and skeptics of half a millennium ago saw for the discovery of this country. They see no harm in paying those to whom they entrust the minds of their children a smaller wage than is paid to those to whom they entrust the care of their plumbing. But the educated citizen knows how much more there is to know. He knows that knowledge is power, more so today than ever before. He knows that only an educated and informed people will be a free people, that the ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of all, and that if we can, as Jefferson put it, enlighten the people generally, tyranny and the oppressions of mind and body will vanish like evil spirits at the dawn of day. And therefore the educated citizen has a special obligation to encourage the pursuit of learning, to promote exploration of the unknown, to preserve the freedom of inquiry, to support the advancement of research, and to assist at every level of government the improvement of education for all Americans, from grade school to graduate school. Secondly, the educated citizen has an obligation to serve the public. He may be a precinct worker or president. He may give his talents at the courthouse, the State House, the White House. He may be a civil servant or a senator, a candidate or a campaign worker, a winner or a loser. But he must be a participant and not a spectator. At the Olympic Games, Aristotle wrote, "It is not the finest and strongest men who are crowned, but they who enter the lists. For out of these the prize men are selected. So too in life," he said, "of the honorable and the good, it is they who act who rightly win the prize." I urge all of you today, especially those who are students, to act, to enter the lists of public service and rightly win or lose the prize. For we can have only one form of aristocracy in this country. As Jefferson wrote long ago in rejecting John Adams' suggestion of an artificial aristocracy of wealth and birth, it is, he wrote, the natural aristocracy of character and talent. And the best form of government, he added, was that which selected these men for positions of responsibility. I would hope that all educated citizens would fulfill this obligation in politics, in government, here in Nashville, here in this state, in the Peace Corps, in the Foreign Service, in the government service, in the Tennessee Valley, in the world. You will find the pressures greater than the pay. You may endure more public attacks than support, but you will have the unequaled satisfaction of knowing that your character and talent are contributing to the direction and success of this free society. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
are indeed privileged to have here with us today a distinguished panel of people who have devoted their talents and their energies to national service. Each of the panelists will speak to you briefly about their work, and we will then take questions from the audience. And I'd like to begin by introducing Mr. Eli Segal. Eli Segal was chosen by President Clinton to meet the challenge of bringing national service into the 90s. Mr. Segal serves as an assistant to President and Director of the Office of National Service. He was Chief of Staff in the Clinton-Gore campaign and Chief Financial Officer during the presidential transition. His love of politics and public service began in the McGovern for President campaign in 1972, where he first met a young campaign worker named Bill Clinton. Mr. Segal has been an eminently successful businessman in Boston, and now he is turning his great talent to one of the President's most important initiatives. We are honored to have him with us here today, Mr. Eli Segal.
Thank you, John. First, I have to make one correction. Senator Kennedy suggested that the National Service Initiative of President Clinton is under Eli Segal. Let me tell you who the National Service Initiative of President Clinton is under. It's under Senator Ted Kennedy. It is not only before his committee, and not only have we looked at him as our guiding spirit, but as someone who has been marshaling the resources of the United States Senate and helping the United States Congress as well. It has been something I think President Clinton knows who his friends are already, and the work that he's done on our behalf has really been extraordinary. Let me also say that it is wonderful to be here with Governor Florio. If President Clinton ever has an opportunity to have his legislation enacted, and we needed our first two service warriors, I can't think of anyone better than Senator Kennedy and Governor Florio, both of whom understand the principles of national service, have lived it in their lives, and will continue to live it as go forward. So it is an honor for me to be here with both Senator Kennedy and Governor Florio, as well as all the honored guests this evening. On election night 1960, I was a 17-year-old freshman at Brandeis University, and I had the opportunity to attend a party with an advisor of President Kennedy's, the then-to-be President Kennedy's, a political science professor at Brandeis named John Roach. It was a wonderful party, and frankly, by the end of the evening, we were all a little bit inebriated. Not inebriated with Professor Roach's legendary beer, but inebriated with the sense of hope and with the politics of the possible. I remember a different quote from President Kennedy than the one you've heard today. It's a quote that I remember John Roach telling us that evening, and it really is extraordinary how much it brings into attention all that we're doing today, all that what you've seen here, and all that we hope we're able to achieve in the months that lie ahead. President Kennedy said that no problem of human destiny is beyond human beings. It's that spirit which brought me, and more important than me, that brought President Clinton into politics. In planning to come here today, I had occasion to look through the book of another son of Harvard, Arthur Schlesinger, who, writing about President Kennedy, wrote the following that I'd like to just read to you. Lifting us beyond our capacities, he gave his country back to its best self, wiping away the world's impression of an old nation, of old men, weary, played out, fearful of ideas, change in the future. He taught mankind that the process of rediscovering America was not over. The energies he released, the standards he set, the purposes he inspired would guide the land he loved for years to come. Bill Clinton's national service agenda springs from a new leader, equally visionary and practical, who wants to unleash the idealism of young people, as John Kennedy did 32 years ago. The times are different. It's certainly a more cynical time than it was in 1960, 1961. We don't come off 3 decades where our government has tried hard, certainly in the 60s and 70s, the government tried hard. Not so hard in the 80s when we told the problem was the government, as opposed to the government being the solution of our problems. It's been a hard pull, and as we look to our legislation, which hopefully we will see, as the Senator suggested, within a few months, we have to recognize the deep-seated skepticism of the American people about it. But on the other hand, we have one enormous opportunity that President Kennedy didn't have in 1960. There wasn't in place in 1960 a social movement, a volunteer movement, a service movement, which sprung up in the middle of the 1980s. It's a truly extraordinary movement that really is a nonpartisan phenomenon. There are volunteers all over America today, and it's quite stunning for me, a 120-day rookie at national service, to look and learn the statistics, that better than 60% of young people between the ages of 12 and 17 are volunteering in their communities right now, an average of 3 hours per week. And almost 2/3 of college freshmen are also volunteering. It's no surprise that during the campaign, when I served as Chief of Staff and I sat down next to the great James Carville in the morning, who told us the campaign was about, "It's the economy, stupid," it used to drive him absolutely crazy when President Clinton, then candidate Clinton, would talk about national and community service. It was called going off message. But whenever President Clinton went off message, it had a resonance in the audience. It had a resonance not only with high school youngsters and with college kids who might be the beneficiaries of his national service agenda, but it has a resonance with everybody. It had a resonance with those of us who remember how we felt about John Kennedy in the White House, how we felt when the Peace Corps was launched, and when the Peace Corps volunteers came home and said that the Peace Corps, they did some good things in Sierra Leone and Thailand and India, but it did more wonderful things for them. And how even older people felt who participated in the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s and 1940s, who understood that they were giving something important to their communities. We don't know what the future will bring. The first 120 days have not necessarily been exactly as we had hoped they would be on November 4th. And I am frequently prone to say that I have learned in my 120 days that capitalism is a lot easier than democracy. But I wouldn't change places with anybody at this point. We are where the action is. This is a moment in time, this is a moment in history for all of us to relish. The national service agenda of Bill Clinton, based on all that Jack Kennedy was offering America 32 years ago, is going to pass. Not because Eli Segal wants it to, and not even because Senator Kennedy is there, but because the American people want it to. This is a momentous moment in our history. We see it coming. We feel it coming. Later on, I'm sure I'll be having an opportunity to answer your questions about this. But at this time, all I really want to say is I can't tell you how proud I am to be here, to hopefully doing my little part 32 years after John Kennedy laid it all out for us, told us we could do better. We have begun that process of doing it with the energy, sense of adventure, and idealism of young people. Let's look back a year or two from this moment, and let's be proud of what we've accomplished. It is going to happen. Thank you so much for having me today.
Our next panelist is Dorothy Stoneman. She is also a Harvard graduate, and she has dedicated her entire career to helping young citizens rebuild their communities and become better leaders. It all began in the 1960s in Harlem, where Dorothy worked for over 20 years developing community-controlled schools, youth programs, housing programs, and coalitions to increase support for these community projects. In 1988, Dorothy joined others to found the National Youth Build Coalition to raise $200 million from the federal government to enable low-income communities to employ and train young people who want to serve their neighborhoods by building housing for the homeless and others in need. Dorothy is now president of Youth Build USA, which is the support center for these programs. The coalition now includes 345 organizations in 45 states, helping young persons to rebuild their communities. Please welcome Dorothy Stoneman.
Thank you, John. I am truly touched to be here commemorating President Kennedy's life with members of the Kennedy family. I think all the members of the family, including the President, have led all of us for decades, demonstrating a life devoted to public service. And I especially want to take this moment to thank Senator Kennedy, who has been the outstanding voice and often the lone voice in the Senate for some of the most humane and progressive policies in the last decades. President Kennedy's call to service inspired my generation. President Clinton's call has already moved the younger generation. My daughter, who's 17, who's in the audience, is doing her independent study in her senior year in high school on national service. We were inspired, but between 1963 and 1968, many of the leaders that we loved and admired were killed. Me and my friends continued for the next 25 years doing what we were doing in the 60s, but we did it with a whole. The day that Vernon Jordan was appointed chief of the transition, I wept for joy. I was watching television with 4 young African-American 20-year-old men who didn't really understand why I was crying. So I explained some history, but to me it was as if we could pick up where we left off in 1968, that my generation, who was influenced by President Kennedy, was in charge now and we could go forward. I think the reason I'm on this panel with these esteemed people, and I'm very honored to be here, is because I have built a piece of the National Service Network, which Eli Siegel will be in charge of, from the ground up over a 15-year period. John Kennedy described a little bit what the Youth Build Network is. I want to say that in Youth Build programs, there are now 15 of them in almost as many cities, and there are about 100 other groups who are waiting and eager to start Youth Build programs. Young people serve their communities by rehabilitating housing for homeless and low-income people. They go back to school at the same time, studying for their GED or for entrance into college. They train for leadership in the community by governing their own program and getting involved in community affairs. They build a cohesive support group of positive peers who dare to articulate their dreams for themselves and their communities. They get support from counselors. When they finish a year of full-time service, many of them go on to college, many of them go on to jobs in the construction trades, but all of them are permanently open and committed to making a difference in their neighborhood and believe in the possibility, mostly for the first time. It isn't hard to build an ethic of service among young people who are poor and have been oppressed. It's actually just liberating what's already there from the overlay of cynicism and despair and rage. When you scrape off that cynicism and despair, you inevitably find a deep yearning to be part of the solution. Young people who have been raised in poor communities have seen some terrible things, have witnessed great pain for people that they love. They'd like to make changes in that, but they haven't felt they had the power, and they haven't had the resources, and their ideas haven't been respected. They don't believe the system cares in general. They believe everyone with influence and power is corrupt, and they're not sure they should trust anyone. So to unleash the positive energy there where it's been suppressed, you have to do the exact opposite of what's been done up to the present. You have to give such profound respect to the intelligence and the capacity of young people who have dropped off the edge, that they believe in themselves and believe they can trust you to help them find a path to become their best selves. You have to have a mini community of people who do dare to articulate the positive dreams and to care about each other. You have to have role models who know how to show their love and who in fact are not corrupt and who have overcome some of the same obstacles and come out of the same experiences as the young people. You have to have the resources for young people to get paid doing the most important jobs in their community that make the most difference to their neighbors. And that's why we picked rehabilitating housing, but there are other things. And you need to offer a path to future opportunity. People need to build and sustain a life that goes beyond the year. The work has to be important. Young people don't really want to clean parks. They don't want to clean something that's going to be messed up the next day. They want to build something permanent that they can show their grandchildren. They want to rescue children who've been abandoned in hospitals who would otherwise be permanently damaged. They want to eliminate crime. They want to do big things. And it's up to the adults to say, yes, those things can be done, and we will marshal the resources to make sure that your energy can go all the way in doing those things. And they need to make a living. A lot of them have children. Their first obligation to service is to take care of their children, and many of them are deeply motivated by that obligation. But if you can offer education, jobs, a positive peer community, loving and honest adult support, important work that will make a difference to their communities, and a path to future opportunities, thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of previously alienated and depressed young people are ready to join this movement. It's demonstrated every day in our youth build programs. Every time we open a new one, 500 young people apply. We have to turn most of them away. Soon, maybe not, because Eli Siegel and Senator Kennedy and President Clinton are moving toward 150,000 openings for full-time service. And in honor of that, I want to quote a young man named Peter Tyson who said, and maybe 10 years ago, he said, "When I entered Youth Build, doors opened to me that I never knew existed. And now I find the doors are closing behind me, and they're closing out my friends. But now together we're opening those doors for Peter's friends, and I'm very happy we're in this together."
I'm pleased to welcome a friend, Elaine Jones, who has had an outstanding career with the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. In her distinguished career, she has litigated many civil rights cases at all levels of the court system, including the Supreme Court, and she has received well-deserved renown for her many achievements. Elaine graduated from Howard University in 1965 and went on to become the first black female graduate of the University of Virginia Law School. Between college and law school, Elaine served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Turkey from 1965 to 1967. And in 1982, she was a fellow here at the Institute of Politics, and it's a privilege to welcome her back.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This brings back memories. The last time I was here, Clarence Thomas and I, in 1982, were debating affirmative action. I invited him, and he came. President Kennedy, when in his inaugural address, when he said to us, very clearly, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I heard that as a high school student, and it just tapped something in me. Now, you know, my background, I'm a product of the segregated South, Norfolk, Virginia, segregated high schools, elementary schools, and had no interaction really with the larger community until I went into the Peace Corps. When we talk about service, I hesitate to call it service because I am the one who was served. The experience and the opportunity, I selected Turkey. Why Turkey? Because I knew nothing about Turkey. I was so naive when I walked through the country and countryside and saw the water pipes in the evening and people sitting there with the water pipes. I couldn't understand why these volunteers were so busy trying to get those water pipes back to the United States. I never got a water pipe back. But when I was served because, I knew that was a larger world. I wanted to travel, had no money. President Kennedy with the Peace Corps provided us an opportunity. It was $40 a month. $40 a month. And I was assigned to teach English at Hacettepe Medical Center in Ankara, Turkey. And we were taught to teach English as a foreign language through a repetitive system. You throw out the verbs and the adjectives and the nouns, and the students have to fit them in the right place in the sentence. After a while, after having done it for about a year, I heard my students coming back at me with this accent. Now, I said, oh no, what have I done? And so now we have a group of Turkish doctors walking around through Ankara who sound like me. Peace Corps Turkey, 65 to 67, is really where I grew up. I grew up there because there was a lot of anti-Americanism in Turkey during that period because of Cyprus and the Turks. I didn't get it, though, because they would not believe that I was an American. The Turks did not accept the fact there was any such thing as a black American. Siyah American, they called. Siyah American, Siyah meaning black. No, they couldn't conceive of that. And so as far as they were concerned, I was Arabic. And they, the Turks and the Arabs, and so I would walk by and it was Arab. Whereas my colleagues, who were white, of course, they got the same contempt and disdain for a while, but it was because they were thought to be and known to be Americans. But we carved out a place in Turkey. I kept contact with students and friends. I was able to travel, throughout the Middle East and in Israel. I went to Israel just before the Six-Day War. And, being stranded on a border between Syria and Egypt and trying to, just learning about life and learning about how other people live and respecting and incorporating the values of others. The Peace Corps made that possible. And when I think about Hacettepe, I only had to teach 6 months out of the year because the medical students there, the language Turkish was a relatively new language, having been started in 1935 by Ataturk, the father of Turkey. And so their textbooks were written either in German or English. And so that's why they had to learn English at there in medical school. You skipped college, went from high school directly into medical school, and spent 7 years in medical school. And so with having to only teach 6 months of the year, then I could travel the other 6 months, all around, but I felt somewhat guilty, and so I taught summer school both summers I was there. When I got stoned in Turkey, I got stoned because I had my first year, some of the first couple of months there, the children I was so odd and strange, so they just couldn't understand. The hair was not straight, the skin was black. She was calling herself American. We know that's not the case. But all of those experiences simply make you stronger. And when I talk about lifetime friendships, I mean that. Now, when I applied to the law school from Ankara, in 1967 and got admitted to the University of Virginia, people often ask me, Elaine, Mr. Jefferson's University in 1967. It must have been difficult. I said, well, you know, of course, there were no black women, no women at all in the undergraduate school, and there were 5 women in law school, and I was the only black. And I said, well, it's all relative, because it's Charlottesville after Istanbul. And so Charlottesville was a breeze. I'll tell you that. When I went back through my Peace Corps Turkey files, and I see this letter written to me, dated 9 June 1967, by Dr. Jamil B. Shenvar, the Dean of the School of Arts and Sciences at Hajitepe Science Center, where I taught. And he writes to me, he said, this is my departing letter. He says, Miss Elaine Jones, dear Miss Jones, perhaps by this letter of appreciation, we can say more clearly how much your enthusiastic efforts and work in our university and hospital have helped to improve the standards of work during this and last year. You might have felt occasionally that results have not measured up to your hopes, but your quiet and unobtrusive acts of kindness outside your official capacities have not gone unnoticed. We know that the effects of your stay will be long-lasting and will have left a deeper and stronger impression than you can imagine. We wish you the best of success in your future work and careers and say thank you for your untiring services. A very polite, a very nice letter, and touching. I know, you know, and all of our letters were different because we compared them. And, but the experience has meant a lot to me, not only through the 2 years in the Peace Corps, but this whole idea of volunteerism and service has carried me throughout my professional career. Mecum says to us in the Creed that there is a destiny that makes us brothers. None goes his way alone. All that we send into the lives of others comes back into our own. And that is true of my Peace Corps service. I just want to say a word about Senator Kennedy. I've spent 15 years in Washington, and every civil rights legislation, every bit of legislation having to do with the fairness and equality and the rights of all of us, making sure that the laws of the land really reflect the needs of the people and address the needs of the people. In my view, Senator Kennedy is the finest senator in the United States Senate.
Our next panelist is no stranger to students here. Bob Coles is a world-famous psychiatrist and a Pulitzer Prize-winning author. He also happens to be professor of psychiatry and medical humanities at Harvard Medical School. Throughout his extraordinary career, Bob Coles has been deeply involved in social service projects and issues in all parts of the country and many other lands. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1973 for his classic book, Children in Crisis, and is currently trying to establish a community learning center here at Harvard. His latest book is on national service, and it is due out this September. Its title is The Call of Service, A Witness to Idealism, and I know we'll get a preview of it today. Dr. Coles.
I think we were all carried back in time, obviously, by that film. I remember I was in the Air Force under the old doctor's draft in charge of a Air Force psychiatric hospital in Biloxi, Mississippi, when President Kennedy was inaugurated. I well remember sitting with my wife and listening to that and responding to it with great, what's the word George Eliot would use, ardently. And I well remember the speech in Nashville because at the time I'd become swept up with the civil rights movement. I saw the children go through mobs to desegregate schools in New Orleans, and instead of coming back here to New England and pursuing a career, I ended up getting to know those children, and through them becoming involved with SNCC and CORE. And I well remember the SNCC students, some of them blacks locally from the South, some of them whites who dared from the South to become involved in the civil rights movement, and of course many of them who came from the North to become part of that movement, including from this university. In 1963, when that speech was delivered at Vanderbilt, even then the SNCC students were planning the Mississippi Summer Project, which would take place a year later, when 500 students from all over this country came to Mississippi, first meeting in Weston College in Oxford, Ohio, for what was called orientation. And I well remember when 3 of them left as the vanguard to go to a place then so obscure in all of our knowledge called Philadelphia, Mississippi, never to be seen again, at least by us. Next summer, it will be the 30th anniversary of that effort. And I remember that summer of '64, the Freedom Houses all through the Delta, the black people and the white people, the Northerners and the Southerners, people from the Atlantic seaboard and people from California, working at voter registration with health problems, legal problems, but also in the evenings, reading, talking, thinking, discussing. I remember so clearly in Canton, Mississippi, one evening, seeing on a desk Invisible Man. I remember seeing Let Us Now Praise Famous Men. I remember seeing some of Orwell's books, carried there by people who not only wanted to work to make life better for this country and for their fellow citizens, but who wanted to understand what they were doing, what this meant to others, meant to them. What they wanted to do is what we all are the creatures who do, to take pause, to reflect, to try to think about what this life means. I remember a delegation of SNCC students going up to Washington to see Robert Kennedy, pushing and pushing as any government needs to be pushed. And I remember him at one point turning to them and saying, what do you folks do when you get home? What do you think about? What is this going to mean for your life, for your lives? And they got into a discussion with him, a wonderful discussion with him, that I guess we would call here in a room like this an intellectual discussion, a moral discussion, a personal discussion. And that's also what service is about. This is a Harvard building. It belongs to a great university. It belongs to a university which in the 19th century saw as its primary mission the installation of character in its students. The installation of character in its students. And what is character? 150 years ago, Ralph Waldo Emerson, came to this university and pleaded with its professors and students to think not only about intellect, but character, namely our conduct, how we behave, what we believe in, and how we fit our knowledge into the lived life. Knowledge untested by life, Emerson warned, is all too sterile. That warning still lives for us today. And this university and other universities have an enormous challenge, it seems to me, it seems to all of us, to take the books and the seminars and the lectures and connect them to the activities of so many of our students who by the hundreds are all about the greater Boston area, tutoring, working in hospitals, working with the elderly, going into prisons, trying, hope against hope, to reach out to teach, to help, and thereby to learn. And all of that moral energy can in turn be connected to the intellectual energy which we're proud to claim as part of the life of this university, of any university, so that those who go to classes and discuss books can go to those classes and discuss those books in connection with what they have seen and heard and tried to do. A larger kind of learning, a moving and touching kind of learning, a learning that ultimately will connect all of us, teachers and students alike, with what the books are about. Because Emerson's writings, or Williams's writings, Dickens's writings, Hardy's writings, these are the writings of people who lived and suffered and knew and then wrote. And we, in turn, through knowing, can connect with that suffering, which means a lot to us and ought to mean a lot to this university. So let us in this university reach out and connect with a very important historical moment, first set in motion over 30 years ago through the idealism of a president, of an attorney general, and living on now through the young people of this country, whether they be college students or not, who are reaching out and becoming what it means to be a human being, the creature of awareness, who knows that there is an end, and who pauses to ask, what does this life mean? How might I live more fully, more ethically, and more responsibly as a citizen of a particular country? So let community service energize the universities, and let the universities respond to community service, starting, among other places, right here in this university, the oldest of them all, and one that ought to respond, and I think will respond, to this particular challenge.
Now we have an opportunity for members of the audience to answer questions. There are 1, 2, 4 microphones, I believe, and I think we will start with that one and then move in a clockwise direction. I would ask only that since there is a short amount of time, that the questions be to the point, and that one identify oneself before asking the questions. Thank you. And please say who the question is directed to.
Testing. Okay. First of all, I'm going to direct my question to Mr. Siegel. I'm a team leader with the John F. Kennedy Library Corps with Candace and John, who you met yesterday. And the Corps consists of members who are in the grades of 7 through 12 and are unable to perform 40 hours a week throughout the whole year of community service. And I was wondering, how can a project like ours be fitted with the National Service Plan that you direct?
Thank you. On January 20th, when Bill Clinton stood up at that beautiful cloudless blue sky, he talked about seasons of service. He didn't put it in the context of a formula where a certain group of people were going to be preferred. It's clear that the major thrust of the message that Bill Clinton gave during the campaign is directed at young people prior to their college years, during and after their college years. But an equally important thrust of the president's, and again I want to speak to Senator Kennedy's leadership in this as well, is what we refer to as service learning programs that exist all over the United States and will be dramatically expanded in the Clinton administration's initiative is successful, in which young people are taught the principles of service and are in fact able to serve. Young people who are serving throughout their high school years are just the kind of people who, once they finish with high school, are the ones that we want to continue that ethic of service as we go forward and they are eligible, and we encourage them to participate in our program to help them pay for their college and be fulfilled citizens as, thereafter.
Thank you.
Yes, my name is Bob Chu. I'm a student here at the Kennedy School and a member of the Kennedy School Project on National Service, which Charles Royer referred to so graciously in his introduction. I'd like to direct a question to Mr. Siegel and also to Dr. Coles. And again, it references the question of service learning. And actually, if the other members of the panel would like to join in, I'd appreciate their responses too. The current initiative, as it's framed, seems to want to accomplish many large objectives at once. Candidate and President Clinton talked about the aspect of the ability to pay off tuition debts through community service. There also is a concern, of course, that the work that be performed through the initiative be meaningful work and be effectively serving the communities that need the help. And finally, we've also talked very eloquently about the effect on those who will be serving. I'm wondering, first of all, Dr. Coles, if you feel that the current initiative has enough of a well-defined service learning component to get those aspects of personal development and reflection that you were referring to in your talk. And Mr. Siegel, if you could comment on whether those broad objectives that the current initiative is, I think, trying to accomplish, are there tensions between putting a monetary incentive in to performing meaningful work and having the kind of personal, internal growth that those of us in service, and particularly the members that we brought to the Kennedy School this weekend, have been talking about and experiencing firsthand? Thank you.
Well, I'll take a first shot at it on the monetary incentives. National community service is not for everybody. I'm also assuming that no one is going to get rich doing national community service. All young people will be paid, in addition to an educational award, is a minimum wage stipend. And I haven't learned of too many people who will take a minimum wage job when they may have better alternatives or greater financial alternatives. This is something that comes from within.